So before we get to coloring this, we need to think about how it looks. Most of the time when you're working in the industry, you're going to have access to concept art and you're going to know exactly what it is you're making, how it should look. But in this instance, we're kind of making our own thing, so we need to know where to take it. So what we're going to look at in this section is we're going to look at creating a reference board. A reference board is a collection of images that artists use as reference while they're working to make sure things are on track to where they need to go. So an example, when I was working on the Nashville Zoo project and I had to make a lot of zoo animals, let's say I was making something like a zebra, I'd go and I would find a ton of different images of zebras and I would throw those together. That way I know what it looks like. Try and find every angle, front, top, side, back, belly, if you can find it. You need to know every bit and piece when you're making a 3D model. In addition to that, I would go deeper and I would start looking up anatomy. I'd look up things like the muscular anatomy for horses and for similar equine animals to really get a feel for how the object is constructed. So that's the type of material we tend to do. In this particular instance, we're kind of going for a look. What do we want this to look like? And we have to think about what it's going to do. Now, the idea behind this project is we basically have this robot. First off, it hovers. So that's something to kind of think about. It's a flying robot. So it's going to be hovering around and it's looking for things on a planet. So it's going to find an object and it's going to go and it's going to pick that up. So obviously it's some sort of a worker robot, and that's a good place to begin. So let's start out by getting some software to help us with this. You don't need the software, but if you want to, there's an amazing piece of software out there called PureRef. I've been using this for a long time, really enjoyed the software. You can just Google PureRef there. You'll see it's the first link. You can click on their website. And here you can use Get PureRef to gain access to it. And this is a software you can use as a free trial, or you can give an amount. You can see here that you can donate a specific amount. You can also put in 0. So if you just want to try it out, you can go to custom, you can use 0. You can see that they're fine with that, but they'd like you to come back and support them in the future. So if you do find you like it and you do want to come back, give them some money, feel free to do so. Okay, I'm going to launch PureRef just so you can see what it looks like and go ahead and use it. So this is what it looks like here. Now, I'm not going to go through how to use it. One thing I will tell you is you can move it around using left click, and you can left click in here and go to help to find out how to use it. Okay, so there is that setup. What's really cool about this is we can use this to build out an image board really quick. Now from here, I'm just going to access a stock photo website where I can grab some free stock photos to populate this with. I would not normally constrain myself to stock photos. I would go and I just go into Google Image, I'd go into Pinterest, wherever I can find inspiration, ArtStation, and start ripping things. But due to the nature of this video being for monetary purposes, I'm going to stick to royalty-free stuff if possible. So a good website for royalty-free is unsplash.com. If you go into Unsplash here, you can find all sorts of photos and the various still images I've been using in this video. You might recognize some if you shop around here long enough. All right. So what I'm going to look for here is just start out with robot and just see what kind of robots come in. And we can look through these to find anything that we deem inspirational. So WALL-E's kind of good inspiration, but I'm not going to go with Lego WALL-E. I think that would be a little bit too far. This could be kind of neat. We have these worker arms. To add it to my PureRef, I can actually just drag and drop. This is one of the things I love about PureRef is you can just grab things out of here and just drag and drop them in. You don't have to copy, paste, doesn't take up space on your desktop. And we can just continue through here. So one of the nice things about going to royalty-free websites when you're looking for stock photos is a lot of times they'll have multiple angles of the same thing, which is nice. But another reason is if you did want to lift anything out of these for the purpose of texturing, using photo compositing techniques, you can do that without having to worry about the copyright side of things as much. You still might need to look at what kind of licensing it has, but generally speaking, you can usually get away with using it directly if you need to. So I'm not really finding too much here in the way of robots, and this is kind of the first, place to start when you're looking for reference. Start with the obvious thing. Where do we begin? Well, we're making a robot. Let's look at robots, right? But we can think of the less obvious things, like what is this thing being used for? And we could think of it as being used for something like cleanup or construction. So we could look up something like cleanup, and we could, look for cleanup things. Okay, that's not very useful, but what about something like construction? All right, what if we specify machines or maybe vehicles? And we start to get into things like this, like excavators, and this could be useful. Maybe we want to think about making it yellow and black. Maybe we want to add in some of the little icons here on things like the arms. Now, remember I mentioned we might want to avoid writing, but maybe we could put some writing on the body. That could be a good way to go. So we could shop around here. This one's interesting. It's orange. It's actually orange here, which is similar to the other robots. So I could also do maybe orange and black. That might kind of be neat. And if we think about the aesthetic, think about the orange against the blue sky, that's a complementary color setup right there. That actually might be the direction we go. Maybe some orange and black there would be a good source of inspiration. So I was originally thinking maybe yellow to go with the construction, but the more we're seeing these, the more I'm liking it. So I think that might be the direction I take this in, and we could explore that a little bit more. Now, I don't want to take up all of your time looking for my own references. You should be able to backtrace my steps if you want to access these. I think that'll be good for now. I think I have a good enough read on some of the things I might want to add, maybe warning signs. There's various vents and stuff we could add in. So there's a lot of interesting details. Also with the arms, these are a bit more detailed than our design, but it gives us something to kind of work with. So I'll stick to that for now. Once you have this set, you can save out these pure rough image boards by right-clicking, coming down here to save as, and then you can set a location. Where I'm going to put it is in my source images, characters, robot, and I'm going to create a new subfolder here called references. And we're going to go ahead and save this out as our robot reference. And save. All right, and that should get us all set up and ready to go to move forward. So as a challenge, what I want you to do is try making a reference board of your own. You don't have to use PureRef. Some other ways you could do it is you could just create a folder on your computer that you save images to. That's kind of the old school way that we used to do it before we had cool reference board software. Another thing you can do is you can actually create a Pinterest board. That's commonly done in a lot of studios. They create Pinterest boards they can share with everyone. Personally, I prefer the PureRef approach here. I have two monitors. So what I like to do is just throw this up on my other monitor while I work. We can also copy and paste these into Photoshop, which can be quite useful, but that will get us something to work from. So go ahead and get some sort of reference, figure out what kind of machine you're going to make. If you want to copy mine, feel free to. You can do the same one as me, but if you would like to create a design of your own, by all means, feel free to grab something else. All right, so now that we have some reference gathered, we're ready to start working on some textures. So in the previous section, I grabbed these various machines for construction. I like the orange-black motif. I'm probably going to use that in my coloration, but something I forgot is to give the robot a little face. So I went ahead and dug through a few more robots and found these. So there's this idea of maybe giving it some sort of a screen for a face, or maybe even just giving it some round eyeballs like this. Now, one downside to these types of eyeballs is we couldn't really change the way it looks. But if we take a look at this robot, since it's circular, we do have the ability to rotate this kind of like it's a head. And that could justify the sphere design. Maybe it's held together by something like magnets. So we could get away with that. And I might go that route just to keep things simple. So let's get started here. I'm going to take my references here and I'm just going to throw them over on my second monitor so they're not in our way. And I'm going to open up Photoshop here. So let's go ahead and get our UVs here. Go into our section 4 project, source images. We can go to characters, robots, and robot UVs. I'm just going to drag this into Photoshop here, which will create me a fresh document that should be the right size, and we can get started. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is just double click down here to unlock this layer and hit OK. And we're going to need some guidance in kind of picking where things should go, deciding how things should be. So one thing that I want to think about right away with my references is what color is going to be what. So I think for the larger pieces, orange would be a good color, looking at the designs. And then looking at how black is kind of scarcely used in these designs, maybe make that the color of the joints. And that would be a good way to go. I know this is all kind of one color, but we want to break our character up, make it look a little bit nicer. And obviously our design is different. It's not interlocking parts like this. It's its own thing. So I might want to bring in something I can sample from. Taking a look at these. This one has a little bit of contamination due to the sky, but I do like the effects we're getting here with some of the coloration. This one I feel like is a little bit more color balanced, a little bit purer, but I don't feel like we have the best read on the metals, but maybe we could utilize that kind of as a source. So let's start with that. I'm going to take this one, and you could just drag and drop it into Photoshop, but since I have this on PureRef, I can actually just copy this and paste it in here as a layer. And you're going to see it's a bit too big. So let's go over a couple useful hotkeys in case you're not aware of these. One is how to zoom in and out. So to zoom out, we can use Control and then plus on our keyboard. And that's going to, that's going to zoom in. So Control plus is going to zoom in. Control minus is going to zoom out. So minus to go backwards, plus to go forward. So I can actually minus if I just hit Control and then minus on the keyboard. Let me bring my hotkeys up here. We'll see Control minus, and you'll see that zooms out. We can then use Control T, so CTRL plus T this time to activate transform with this layer selected. So make sure the layer is selected, and then we can scale this down. So I'm just going to hit Control T, and you can see why I zoomed out. We can then grab a corner, just scale this down, and we can float this around in our scene as we see fit. That way we don't need to worry about its placement. Next thing we're going to do is just fill this in with a base color. So let's fill it in with the base of orange. I'm going to switch to my brush tool. I can access my brush tool by hitting B on my keyboard. That will activate my brush. I need a fresh layer. So let's create a fresh layer down here. We can use this plus icon to create that layer. Move the hotkeys here so they're in a spot that's a little bit less annoying. But go ahead and create a fresh layer there by hitting that plus key. And then with our brush, we can sample our color. So I'm going to come down here to my color swatcher. I'm going to hold Alt, which is going to let me activate the eyedropper. And I'm going to click on the orange here to sample the color and hit OK. Now, once we have this layer in place, we can use the Alt backspace to fill in the layer with orange. And you'll see now we have that set up. So let's go ahead and do some management. I'm going to double click here. I'm just going to name this base orange. I'm going to double click on this one and name this one our ref. And then this one, I'm going to double click and name this UV. And I'm just going to move the UVs up to the top here. I'm going to utilize a blending mode here. And for this one, I'll go ahead and do a subtraction so we get the black color for now. We can go to subtract, and we can see how that looks. So that's going to get us that set up there. What we need to do now is kind of determine where the black areas are, and we need to sample our black color. You can hit X on your keyboard to switch between your active and your secondary color. So if I hit X there, I can swap. We then hit Control plus to zoom in. Spacebar will allow us to move when zoomed in. I don't know if we've gone over that yet. And then I can just hold down Alt. I don't even need my color picker open to sample the metal here. And you'll see it's actually going to give me a very dark blue, which is okay. I could also sample in the shadow here. I might want to check the values here, clicking on this. Something to be aware of when you're working with textures is you don't want your red, green, and blue to equal 0. So let's talk about why. Black is never black in 3D. The reason why is when light strikes a surface, what happens to the surface where it hits is it multiplies. And the thing mathematically about 0 is 0 times anything is going to equal 0. So you want to avoid the color black when you're using your textures, because what happens is when the light strikes that area, it's just going to act like a dark void. There's going to be no transfer of color, and there's really going to be no transfer of luminance. Now, we can use this for effects if we want to, like if you wanted to have, let's say, a vent going inside of an object. Instead of modeling it, you could actually just have black be the color, and it shouldn't receive any light. But in this case, we do want to receive light. So we might want to be careful there. I may not want to sample the shadow area. I may want to go back to maybe sampling the top area. And when you're sampling from metals in particular, sometimes you just have to guess. But I think this dark blue will look nice and should give us an okay result. If it doesn't, we can always swap it to fit our needs. Now, the next issue we have, though, is first off, what do we put this on? So we're going to put this on a layer. I'm going to create another layer. So just come down here to create that layer. And we can use the paintbrush to paint this in. So I'm going to bring this under my UVs. I'm going to make this my metals. And we can check our brush up here to make sure we have a hard round brush. So I'm going to click on this to bring up the brush menu. Up here at the top, this is going to be where we have these. So if you're using a tablet, you could use something like the pressure size one. I actually don't like pressure when I'm blocking colors in, so I'm just going to use the hard round. So we're going to go ahead and get that. And this will allow us to paint with the brush. If you have a Wacom pen, you can actually flip your pen over and you can erase. If you don't have a Wacom pen, you can actually just switch to the E key to erase. So B for brush and E to erase if you are using a mouse, okay? So E for erase. All right, so now we know how we're gonna get this on here. The next is where, right? So I want this to be on the little black spheres. That's not too hard to tell, but in the case that you can't tell what's what, you can come into Maya here and open your UV editor, and you can select the objects to identify their location. So if I check this sphere, and then these spheres, you can kind of get a feel for where they're located. Now, since we're just using the default layout though, it's kind of obvious that a sphere is this square shape and a cylinder is this box shape. So basically, we're just going to be coloring in our spheres. So let's go ahead and do that. I don't want to get to this one, however, and we can start just using our brush. So you don't need a Wacom pen for this. You can just kind of come over this, rather sloppily. And don't worry about what it looks like on the outside of the borders. Just worry if it goes over into another UV shell that isn't supposed to receive this color. So you actually do want a little on the outside. So if you remember that idea of gutters we talked about when we were doing the layout, that's going to be one of the things you take into consideration here. Now, another thing I just realized is my brush size has been okay for this so far, but what about when I get over to those corners there? Is this brush going to do the trick? And you'll see, not quite. I'm going to hit Control Z there to undo, and I might want to come in with a smaller brush. To change the brush size, you can use the bracket keys on your keyboards. That's what those look like. And those will increase and decrease it respectively. So you can see as I press these, those go up and down. Now, unfortunately, my little hotkey checker doesn't actually have this registered as a key, apparently. So it won't be showing that when I do it, but that's the keys for it, those bracket keys. If you aren't a fan of hotkeys and you're like, whoa, this is too wild, you can also change it in the brush settings. Now, this is a little bit abstract. If you come up here to the brush menu here, where we switched our hard alpha, you can see there's a size and hardness here. So you can actually change the size there by sliding it. It's a little bit more painstaking. I would suggest, once again, using the bracket keys, which look like that, to do it. But if you don't know where those are at, there you go. Another thing, if you want perfectly straight lines, if you guys hold down Shift, so if you click with your mouse with the brush and then hold Shift and drag, you can get perfectly straight lines, which can be kind of nice if you just want a nice clean edge on something. Okay, so that is almost all of the spheres. It looks like we have a couple more over here for probably the finger joints. We can go ahead and block these in with color. And then we'll have the base patterns done. So I'm just going to hold Shift to quickly chunk these in. You could also use the shape tool for this if you want, but I find that coloring with the brush tool is usually quicker. Okay, so there we go. That should give us what we need. And we can turn off our UV layer's visibility by hitting the eyeball there, do a File, Save Scene As, and then save this out. So it's going to go into our character section, source images, characters, robot, and we can go ahead and just make this robot_color and save. Now let's go ahead and hook this up and see how it looks as a base block-in. We need a new material on our robot, so I'm just going to highlight the whole thing here. I'm going to right-click and assign new material. And remember, we're using the standard surface, so we can just grab it right at the top here to assign it. And you'll notice I'm not going into Hypershade today. I don't need to. If you end up on this attribute editor, you can click here to access the standard surface shader we just assigned. And we can name this. So I'm going to name it at the top, robot_material. And where we're going to plug this into is the color section. So just like we did for the ball, I know it's a little bit intimidating, but we're just going to plug it right in there, just like we did with the ball. But this time we're doing it on a standard surface. So let's come to that file input. And in here, we can go ahead and grab the file, just like we did previously with the ball project. And what's different here is this is going to assign this material to all of these. And the color is going to color everything. So what we can do is we can click on our file now to open this up. This will bring us to our source images. We can go to character, robot, grab our color, hit open. And remember, you won't see anything because we need to either hit the 6 key or we need to come up here and we need to click on the texture icon. So either the 6 key or the texture icon will do. And you will see there is our object. Now you might notice it's a little bit dark. Remember, we set up some lights in here and we did that for a reason. Because the standard service is working with the PBR renderer, the physically based renderer, we need lights for it to see it correctly. So we'll need to flip that little light switch on there. So that way we can go ahead and see our character. And there we go. And you'll see that the black actually looks pretty good with that slight blue. And we just have our nice looking orange in there and our base character blocked in. We can confirm we got the right areas, which is great, but we may want to add in some more features that we might see on some of our references here. For example, various things like vents might be good. Because this game is a little character, we might want to add in eyes, maybe copying from here, or maybe doing something like a screen. I kind of like the idea of just these little eyes. We might try that out. And I don't know, maybe some of the other details here, maybe just some paint lines, something to break things up would be nice. Before we do that, as a challenge, what I want you to do is get to this point. I want you to get your UVs into Photoshop. I want you to block in whatever the base color is you're going to make your object, and then start blocking in the other base colors for the other sections. And these are going to act later on as kind of regional masks. So we want to get these chunked in so we have those set up. Go ahead and do that. And when we come back, we'll start to add in some of the other details just to give it a bit more character. All right, so let's add in some more details. If you haven't already done so, go ahead and save. I'm going to go ahead and save this as O2, and we can add in some of these details. So I'm going to tackle those eyes right off the bat. And where do I put them? Well, we're going to find out by some trial and error. First things first, though, I'm going to build these out, and I have to think of what kind of color I might want these to be. I do want these to distinctively read as eyes, and I notice this glowing here. Maybe I'll make them glow later on. For the time being, I like this idea of a ring with maybe just white in the middle or some light color. Now, just like with black, you generally don't want to use pure white in textures. It's not as big of a deal, but just remember with the multiply factor, anything times 1 is equal to itself. So sometimes white is worth avoiding as well as black in the purest form. To get these started, though, I'm going to come over here to my shapes, and we're going to use this familiar tool from the ball project to create some perfect circles, or in this case, a perfect circle, so I can kind of figure out the placement, but I'm just going to come to the ellipse here. And if you look at this, remember we have strokes on these shapes. We can use a stroke on the outside and just a color on the inside. For the fill, I'll come in and pick a color here. If you want to sample off of Photoshop, you can, but I think I'm just going to come and find a light white color, maybe leaning towards blue, hit OK. And then for the stroke, I'll use the same dark color we actually have already. I could just hold down Alt. Just kidding. Looks like it didn't take there. I have to make sure I'm on the stroke, pull up the color picker and hit Alt. There we go. And we can set that up after. From here, I'll just click and hold Shift to drag to create out my eye shape. I can play around with the stroke size here to give it more or less stroke. And then I can move this around on my UVs. Just be careful you don't grab the UVs on accident. This is obviously too large, so I am going to scale this down. and just kind of position it in the middle for now to see where that is relative to our texture. So with that placed, I can hit save and we can hop back into Maya here. And remember, if we come into the attribute editor in the robot material and just double click on our material, it will refresh for us. And we can see that eye is somewhere over there and it's very spread out. So it's kind of spread across 1, 2, 3, 4 of these. So we're going to need to squish this, which is kind of weird. I'm going to squish it sideways by holding shift so I can edit it and then just save and double click. Okay, that looks a little bit better. I might squish it just a bit more and save and see if we can't get that to work. Now, remember, this is once again due to UV stretching and UV squashing. In this particular case, it's stretching. I also noticed that going that direction, it kind of went towards the back of the sphere. So I'm going to move this over here so it's more towards the front, and we'll try and find a good placement. You're probably wondering why this seems so hard. The reason this seems so hard is there are some tools I have not shown you yet that make this easier. We're going to look at those in a future segment, but I want you to try this out just to kind of get a base mastery of the tools. All right. So we're taking it slow on purpose, just so you're aware. I'm going to come up here to my UV editor and turn this on so I can see the UVs and see how this kind of correlates. But more importantly, with the UV editor on, we can see this thing here called a UV seam, which is this white line. And we generally can see that in the viewport. So I can see it's on the side there. So what I can tell from that is that my eyes need to be somewhere this direction in this region because that's where this is set up. I could even count this if I had an idea of where I wanted this to go, or if I wanted to find the midsection, we could come in here and I can see how many units away from the side the middle is. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the 6 on the line here is going to be the middle. Now, inside of Photoshop, if I want to mark that, I can. You'll notice I have these little rulers on here on the sides. If you don't see those, you can come up here to View and Rulers to turn these on. And you can move these from the side to kind of mark where these go. So for example, if I go here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's going to show me where the middle of my character is. So right on that line there, I can use this marker. Let me zoom in with plus so I can get this to align here. And we could use this to place our eyes. So here, I'm just going to reduce this down, maybe find a midpoint there. I'm going to reduce the stroke now. I can come in here and the stroke, I could probably set that down way lower. That's not the stroke size, is it? That is the stroke size. Why is it not going lower? There we go. So we can set that a lot lower. And we can just see how this looks real quick. We can save, make sure that I got that right. I'm just hitting Alt-Tab there to get back and forth. And I actually need to move that over a bit more. I think I might have mathed that wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that is correct. But really, I just want it over 1 next to it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's why I counted lines. So I'll place that right about there. And we could kind of pick from the top point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So that's going to be 9N. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So right here should be more or less the mid point. I guess I could have just eyeballed that. You can also use your arrow keys on your keyboard to kind of nudge this around. That will get that set. So let's go ahead and save that again. Double click, and we can see where that's at now. So we can decide if that's good. I might want those a bit bigger and a little bit less stretched looking, but we'll work on that. So maybe something like this. Save. Double click. Not quite. All right. I'll just move these around. So you can play around with this till you get something that is perfect for what you're aiming for. This is a bit challenging, but it works out okay. All right, so I kind of like that. I think that's a good start for one eyeball. I do need to get a second one in there. I don't like that it doesn't have a perfect even surrounding there. I think if I nudge this down just a little top and bottom, I can get this close. It's not going to be easy to match the stretching, but it's good to try. Something to be aware of is later on we'll go over unfolding UVs, and we'll be able to just get rid of the stretching altogether. I could also consider getting rid of the stroke and just having the I be an I for now. That way we don't have a discrepancy there. And I think we could use a different technique later to get that to look better. So something like that works. Now I want to get this on the other side, but I also want to get it in approximately the right location. So let me go ahead and just name this I01 in here. And I'm going to duplicate this. Remember, the way I duplicate is I hold the Alt key and drag up, and that gives me a duplicate. From here, if I hit Control T, I can use the transform. And an interesting trick is this little icon right here is the pivot. So what you might already be aware of from Maya is if we place this pivot on here, we should be able to mirror across. And we can by right-clicking and doing a flip horizontal. And you'll see that will flip that right across. So I put that at the axes line, just like we would do in Maya, and I was able to use flip horizontal to flip that across. And that will give us the perfect placement, and we can save. So that'll give me a couple little eyeballs for this character that look halfway decent, if not perfect, but it's something. So we'll go ahead and leave that there. We can merge these down if we want to right-click and merge shapes. We can call that good. I could try bringing back in the stroke if I want to see how that looks with it. It might be okay if they're not perfectly round. I don't know if anyone would notice from a distance, but it does seem kind of obvious. I could also continue to kind of squash these down. So if I hold down Alt-Shift, I can move them together. And we can try and nudge these till we get a more perfect circle or a less perfect circle. I'm going to hit Control-Z. I'll leave those there for now. I can experiment with that on my own time. But that will go ahead and give us some base eyeballs there that we can use for this character. And we can think about any other sort of interesting markings we might want to add. We could experiment with maybe adding in some vents or other areas, maybe something like this that has a bolt. On the arms here, maybe adding in just a dark line to kind of break them up would be good. We could use the same blue, but we could differentiate with metal later. So I could take a look at where those are at. These are the larger arms here. Those are going to be the smaller ones. So if we wanted to, maybe on the forearms, for example, add in some breakup, we could take a look at that. We can see the forearm there. Now, once again, we look for the UV seam that's on top, which is okay. So that means the seam, if we place this in the middle, should be essentially in the middle. I could come to my shapes, use something like a rectangle tool. And with this, I could just drag out a rectangle if I wanted to just add in a nice shape. I'm going to turn off my stroke, maybe come up here and sample our blue color again. There we go. So we'll use that for our dark areas. And let's say I wanted to have one on the front and the back. I could start by finding the front area. I know that's kind of the top section. So maybe around here would be something like the mid. And I don't want it to take up too much space here. So we could just kind of do visual here. So we go, what, 1, 2, 3, 4 away from here, and then 2 lines. So 4, and then I want to do this for maybe 3 lines. And then the opposite side should be the same. So I can hold down Alt and try moving this over. Just place this 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Have that take up about 2 spots. And save. And that's a little bit perfect. Maybe I want to expand those out by 1 if I wanted that to be a little bit more even. But that would give us something front and back. And I might need to do the front one a little bit differently than the back one. Or maybe I just want to do one on the front and not one on the back. But we could do something like that to break up the form if we want to. So a little bit of experimentation. Now, I don't think I'm going to bother. I think I'll keep it real simple for now. And we'll explore maybe adding in some of those details later. But this should give us a good start. I'm also going to turn off the eye stroke for now. We'll see if we can't bring in that effect later on with a different effect. All right, so let's save, and we can move forward and just have this be kind of our base robot block-in for the start. So let's go ahead and start exploring creating some of the other channels next.